I'm whispering because it's 7 o'clock in the morning and I don't want to wake the neighbours up. Hello and welcome back to my garden. Now, if you're a novice gardener like me, I would love it if you would cheer me on in the comments. So why don't you consider subscribing to my channel? All you need to do is to tap the red button marked subscribe, and that means next time you open the YouTube app on your phone, your laptop or your computer, one of my videos will be waiting for you. Now, today's project, my sister has grown me pots and pots of zinnia from seed, so I need to make sure I plant them out. And the next question is, are my zinnias and the cosmos I planted out last week going to give me lots of bushy growth so I can enjoy cutting them to enjoy indoors? And I'm not quite sure about that. I'm wondering whether I need to pinch out the growing tips. It feels a bit weird doing that, cutting something back that's only just started growing. But is that the right thing to do? Let me know in the comments. As I was saying to my dad, I'm really lucky that my sister likes nurturing seeds and seedlings, and then I get the enjoyment of having the cut flowers later in the year. So Maggie is out with me this morning as I start doing my gardening. I'm going to start by placing my zinnias where I want them to be. I've divided them up into 3 patches throughout the length of the garden. I'm quite worried about 2 of the patches because I've put them under the shade of the tree, which is not bright sunshine and also actually quite dry. So I'm going to have to do a bit of a compare and contrast and see how well they fare in the different parts of the garden. The 3rd patch of zinnia, I'm going to plant them a bit closer to my kitchen window. There's a little gap I can see through what I've already got planted, and it'll look lovely if I can see some zinnias from that vantage point. I've got all my tools at the ready, the watering can and my trowel and gardening gloves, so I'm just breaking it down into little jobs. I don't want to get overwhelmed, and in fact I end up spending about an hour in the garden and I've still got 2 sets of the zinnias to plant, but it was as much as I could manage at that time of the day. So firming the soil back around the zinnia and then give it a good water in afterwards. I've got visions of beautiful multicoloured clumps of zinnia in just a few weeks' time. I wonder how long they will actually take to flower. Last year I grew some cosmos in a tub and they looked absolutely spectacular right up until the end of September, I think. It's the beginning of June now, Father's Day in a week or so's time, and then of course it's the longest day. And then the nights start to draw in. It always seems so strange that we're halfway through the year, but actually in terms of what's happening in my garden, it all seems to be very quiet still. One thing I am going to have to decide is whether I'm going to habitually water my plants. What I've been doing is watering them when I first planted them, but I haven't watered them since. So what do you think? Should I be watering them more frequently? And having planted my flowers, I'm going to chop them back, or pinch them out, I think is the technical term. My nails aren't particularly strong, so I can't just pinch them between my fingers, so I'm using my floristry scissors for this job. Have I done the right thing? I've ended up taking off 2 sets of leaves at the top. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'm much more confident with this though, and I'm cutting back the foliage from my daffodils. I noticed that my neighbour did this the other week. Now these are the daffodils which were very disappointing. I planted them at the end of the last year. I must have had 6 blooms. I think it was mainly the pheasant-eye ones. They had white petals and a lovely bright orange centre. I got lots of lush, lovely growth. I'm just hoping that's fed the bulbs so that next year they're actually going to give me a proper show. As I clean out my daffodil foliage, you can see my hellebores are taking centre stage. But again, they've never flowered either, although they put on lots of new growth. And then in between, I've got the cosmos, which I planted out last week. I'm going to have to pinch those out as well too. But have I left it too late? Should I have done my pinching out much earlier in the season when the plants were much shorter? I really don't know the answer to that, so if you do, can you let me know in the comments, and then I'll know for next year. While I've got my scissors in hand, I'm going to deadhead my native geraniums. I'm just cutting these back as if I was cutting flowers, but should I also be cutting back the foliage to bring it back to the stalky stumps? Again, if you know more than I do, I would appreciate the benefit of your advice. So then I'm going to cut the tips out of my cosmos here too. Can you see in the background that my foxglove is putting up lower shoots? And my rosemary is looking pretty healthy too. Cleaning out my my tulips here. These were the last set I planted and I got so fed up. I tried planting them in a trench and it just looked very stiff and static. All my other bulbs were in little clumps and came up looking very naturalistic in style. But then I just had this short, stumpy row of tulips, and they were beautiful though. Just behind me, can you see my Physostegia? This was just one single stem at the beginning of the year that had overwintered, and it had then fallen over, and the side shoots have started to grow upwards. And I was just picking it up. I was wondering whether it might have rooted to create another plant. Do you think that's actually going to happen? Again, let me know in the comments. Anyway, I've got my scissors in hand and I've decided to deadhead my lilac. I can see this from the kitchen window. It doesn't look particularly pretty. The camera's at a bit of a weird angle here. That fence is actually straight. And here are those faded lilac blooms up close. I'm going to just toss them into my compost bin. Sadly, I missed. This is the delphinium I planted out last week with the little clods of coffee grinds. I bet you missed the other delphiniums, didn't you? And the two astrantias, they've been eaten by the slugs. These are my campanulas. I planted 3 and one of them suffered, but the other 2 look quite healthy. And the same thing's happened with my dahlias. I planted 4 in total. One's totally disappeared, you can see in the back there. One to the front doesn't look particularly healthy, but the 2 at the back don't seem too bad. And then right underneath my bay tree is this cranesbill geranium. I bought it last year thinking it was going to have lovely long stems, and then realised it was a dwarf variety. But in that shaded area, I do seem to have forced it to grow a little bit taller. The sedum's looking really healthy. But off to the side here, is that something that's self-sown, a flower, or have I just got myself a rather healthy looking weed? If you can identify that, do let me know in the comments. I'm quite pleased by the scabious, which is just popping into view. I bought 2 of these last year and I've managed to overwinter them by some miracle. And one of them has already gone over. They're such a pretty little flower. They're a little bit hidden where I've got them planted, and they're also on quite short stems. I don't know whether that's because I've got them in a shaded location, because naturally they are quite short stem flowers, or whether again I've inadvertently picked up something that's a dwarf variety. As you can see, I've got some more tulip foliage which I need to clear out. This is lavender that's bobbing away in the foreground. I've got 4 plants here which I transplanted from our front garden. They were a bit leggy next to our drive, so my husband has planted a more compact variety. And then look, in my acanthus, my bear's breeches, I've got a single bud coming up. I'm quite pleased to see that. When I planted this plant, it was a gift from a friend, and it came in a bag just almost as a series of leaves with not much root to it. Well, now it's time to pack away in the garden. I'm going to have a cup of tea and some breakfast, and then come back and plant my last 2 remaining patches of zinnia. So thank you so much for joining me. And if you have any tips and advice, please do share them with me in the comments. That's all for me for now, and I'll see you in the garden next time.